All right, and we are live. Well, we're doing a recording. So welcome, DoorGrow hackers, to the DoorGrow show. If you are a property management entrepreneur that wants to add doors, make a difference, increase revenue, help others,
lives, and you are interested in growing your business and life, and you're open to doing things a bit differently, then you are a DoorGrow hacker. DoorGrow hackers love the opportunities, daily variety, unique challenges, and freedom that property management brings. Many in real estate think you're crazy for doing it. You think they're crazy for not, because you realize that property management is ultimate, high trust, gateway to real estate deals, relationships, and residual income. At DoorGrow, we are on a mission to transform property management businesses and their owners. We want to transform the industry, eliminate the BS, build awareness, change perception, expand the market, and help the best property management entrepreneurs win. I'm your host, property management growth expert, Jason Hull, the founder and CEO of DoorGrow. Now, let's get into the show. And I'm hanging out here with someone else from DoorGrow, Jon Ray.
Yeah, thanks for having me. We're part of the DoorGrow growth hacker team.
So
yeah,
we were sitting around thinking, like, what can we talk about? And the topic that I wanted to talk about is a common problem that I see come up. So I coined a phrase for it. And I don't know that anybody else has ever talked about this phrase, but this is just what I felt like calling it. And so our topic today is premature expansion in property management.
Premature expansion. Tell us about it, Jason. Because I'll preface it by saying, I've been talking to a lot of our seed hackers, a lot of property managers that are part of the Facebook group. And, ultimately everybody's trying to figure out what is the best way to see consistent, comfortable growth. And one of the things that has come up on a recurring basis on these calls is that as people are thinking about the various strategies that are available to them for growth, especially at some kind of an accelerated pace over what they're doing, oftentimes there's a consideration, if not an outward movement, towards moving into another market. And as you and I were talking about that, that can sometimes be a great strategy, but sometimes it can be an absolute failing strategy. And so premature expansion is basically your term and how you're packaging that concept of when that kind of expansion into another market may not be the best strategy. So can you talk about a little bit, in more detail on how somebody should be thinking about whether or not they should move into another marketplace?
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot that goes into deciding whether to move into a new marketplace, or premature expansion could be even buying a new business or new location. It's any sort of expansion. And usually the motivation behind it is they want to grow. They want to make more money. And the challenge is that sometimes it's not all that it's cracked up to be. So the most common scenario, one of the most common, is somebody will come to me and they'll say, hey, we want to buy another property management company in another market, or we're going to open up a new office in another market. And usually when I ask them why, they feel like they've hit a plateau in their growth in their current market. This is usually what's fueling this. They feel stuck. They were doing something that was working. They usually get to maybe the 200 to 400 door range in what I call the second sand trap. And once they get into that space, they think, well, we got this far in this location. We're hitting a limit or a plateau. Let's just go duplicate that effort and do it somewhere else. It makes sense on the surface. It sounds so easy. Like, we did it here. Well, maybe we've tapped this out, and maybe now it's time to go into a new market. So I think there's a lot of myths that drive that. One myth is that it's going to be easier in another market. Like, a second market will be easier. I think that's almost never, ever, ever the case. The second location is always more difficult. It's more difficult to manage. It's more difficult to maintain. If you have a second office, you're going to need a second set of staff. It's just harder. And it's harder. It's not just you know, it might mean that you're doing double the amount of work as an entrepreneur trying to run 2 locations. I think also they think, well, what worked here? I think that's a myth. What worked in our first location to get us to this point might work there. So if they've been in business for maybe 10 years and they played this, you know, pay-per-click game in the beginning, or they were doing like all property management leads in the beginning, and that stuff has shifted and it's not as easy. You know, things have shifted and changed, but they're thinking, well, we got this far, let's just go do what we're doing now over here, and maybe it will grow just as fast. And I think they run into some problems because fundamentally what used to work may not be working. I think another myth is that it's some sort of shortcut, like to growth. And it's not really a shortcut. There's a lot of challenges and difficulty. What's easier than opening up a new location and then trying to add more doors and to build out basically a whole nother company, essentially, is to grow where you're at. That's far easier. And so I think a lot of times when I ask them, here's the golden question I think to ask yourself if you're a person listening to this, thinking, I want to expand, well, let's open up and go into a new city. I think first of all, you need to ask yourself, do you really want to be there? Do you want to drive out there? Do you want your team to be taking trips out there? You know, does that feel comfortable to you? Because ultimately, I think you can build the business that you want to have. And it doesn't have to be the business that you can do. I think that's a big temptation we make as entrepreneurs is we build the business we can. Oh, well, we can do this and I can add the service, we can do that. And then we get scattered, we end up diluting our effectiveness. And so in the case of Premature expansion, they open up a second market. What inevitably I see happen almost every time is their first primary location starts to suffer and struggle. And they start to lose those doors and customer service levels drop. And there's challenges and they're having more difficult time running both. Things have to be incredibly well dialed in order to do that, to make that work.
Yeah. So, but ultimately what you're talking about is kind of this concept of duplication. Like we all wish that we could duplicate ourselves so that we could do twice as much work. And in entrepreneurship, in order to successfully duplicate yourself, there's some certain things that has to happen. Otherwise, that duplication just looks like split energy. And then neither of the parts are getting as much as the first whole was. So maybe you can talk a little bit about, you know, what does it look like to successfully duplicate yourself? And you know, it seems to me when I was running teams at Google and when we were thinking about whether we were going to expand into a new marketplace, we wanted to make sure that we had maximized our efforts in the current city that we were in as much as humanly possible. And we wanted to make sure that we had templatized all of our processes so that the management wasn't directly involved in the success of the business. They were guiding strategy and vision, but they weren't operationally necessary other than that high level guidance. So maybe you can talk a little bit about what that would look like in a property management business and how somebody should think about that concept of duplication.
Yeah, I think I love what you're saying about what they would do at Google. It makes a lot of sense. What I've seen is, in my experience in helping, you know, hundreds, maybe even thousands of entrepreneurs, is there's always this myth that if I could just clone myself, all my hopes and dreams would come true. I know all this stuff, I can do all this stuff, and then all my hopes and dreams would come true. Let me tell you from experience what it took to duplicate myself. Because I'm pretty much gotten somebody to do every single role that I used to do in the business. And it takes probably about 10 people. That's my experience. It takes about 10 people to duplicate yourself. So you're never going to find that one person that can do it all. And if you do, they're going to become your new competitor, or they're going to go start their own business, or they're going to leave you after they realize they can probably do stuff better than you. Just like you probably figured out back when you were working for somebody. You're like, I could do this better, right? That's the E-myth, that's the entrepreneur myth, that's what everybody wants to do. They're like, I could do this. And a lot of business owners that are running businesses now, they used to work for somebody and they're like, I could do this. And then they start learning that they need to become an accountant and they need to become a graphic designer and they need to become, you know, whatever all the different roles are and the different hats that you wear. And so I think just like that in a property management business, if you're going to expand into a new market, you have to realize which roles which hats are you still wearing? Which seats are you still sitting in on this, bus that's the business? If you're managing and you're acting as BDM and you're acting as, the, property manager or maintenance coordinator or any of these operationally tactical, critical roles, then the challenge is you go into a new market, your life's going to become twice as hard with another location. And there's that momentum and that inertia in getting something new going. Training one new person makes your life twice as hard. And so if you're going to build out a new team there, if you're going to build out maybe just a satellite staff, it's still a lot more work to get that all built up. And so that's why if you don't have high leverage when it comes to systems, high leverage when it comes to process. And so I think, maybe that's a good question to ask yourself is, how dialed in is your business now that if you walked out the door and left for a month, that would it fall apart? Would there be a problem? Would it still operate? Maybe then if the answer is, yeah, it'd be totally fine. Maybe then it's time to open up a new location, because that means you have things really well dialed in. You've got the right people. And then the question is also connected to that. If you lost any single team member, think of who you think is the most critical person on your team. If they killed over and died, God forbid, or they left your business, or they went to work for a competitor, or they went to start their own property management business, how quickly would you be able to get back up to speed? Do you have all their processes defined? Do you know what they're doing? Do you know what they do on a day-to-day? Do you feel like somebody else could step into that role very easily because everything's documented? And if not, opening up into a second location can be really, is dangerous, because you're not going to have all those things dialed in. And I think ultimately overwhelm is going to set in. This is the big thing for us entrepreneurs. Like we operate basically in two speeds. It's like we're in momentum and on fire and we feel alive, or we're in a state of overwhelm, feeling stuck and frustrated and stressed. And so if you're already feeling stressed and stuck and frustrated, that's probably not the time to go heap more onto your plate.
Yeah. So just playing devil's advocate, because I think a lot of the people that I talk to in the property management space that are considering this move are like, well, that may be accurate advice for most people, but I'm better than most people. And I was able to bootstrap, where I'm at now, and I was able to scrap it all together, and I didn't document all of those processes. So why can't I do the same thing for a second location? And so maybe you can talk a little bit to me and explain to me why it's different with the second location. Because it is true that you can kind of figure things out when you're physically there in person. But as you start to satellite out, it's a different kind of mentality that you have to take. And the bootstrapping method doesn't work so well. Can you talk about why that is?
So I think, when you open up a business, just through sheer will of force and sheer will and just personality, if somebody can sell and somebody is driven, they can create a business. They can probably even get it up to about $1 million in revenue annually just through that. But beyond that, you have to have a team. And in property management, you're going to probably need a team long before you hit that amount in revenue. And you need support. Otherwise, it's just not scalable. You're going to start to burn out really quickly. This is why we see so many people get stuck in the first stand trap, which is about 50 or 60 units as a solopreneur. They'll get stuck there. So if you're at the place where you're at about 200 to 400 units, you've probably got some team members. You probably at least have a maintenance coordinator, maybe a property manager, somebody helping with showings. You've got some pieces in place, so you've gotten that off your plate. That doesn't mean now you could open up a whole new location, because still tons of things are still relying on you. Just pay attention. Like if your team members are coming into your office or texting you throughout the day, then you are a bottleneck in your business already. You will be even a bigger bottleneck. And what happens, my entire team we're virtual, right? And so if you bring on people that are at a remote office, they're not going to be able to get their questions answered quickly. They're not going to have the support that they need. You need to like live there for like at least 90 days till everybody's onboarded, systems are in place, and be able to do that. And that's possible to build that up, but that means you need everything really well dialed in so that stuff doesn't just gravitate towards chaos. There needs to be protections in place so that you can ensure that people are doing what needs to be done.
Yeah, and I want to unpack that word systems and really the phrase systems and processes, because I think a lot of people, at least in the calls that I'm having with property managers, when I say systems and processes, they're like, oh yeah, well, we're already on AppFolio. We already have Rent Manager. And
Right.
that's actually not what you're talking about. So can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, so for example, well, okay. So when it comes to processes, you need to have, here's the way I look at it. If somebody on your team quit, fired, or died, or whatever, that means somebody else could step in, they could read a process, they would know exactly how to do it, and they'd be able to figure it out. If all the processes exist in that person's head and your head, then I'll tell you what, the difference, there's a massive gap usually, or significant gaps between what you think they're doing and what they think they should be doing. There always is, because it's all just in their head. Like we know internally at DoorGrow that this happens and we have processes documented. There's still disconnects sometimes. One team member thinks, well, this is how I've been doing it, and I think this is how it's supposed to be done. And we have it documented, which might even be a little bit different because sometimes people don't refer to the documentation all the time. And then there's like what the visionary or the entrepreneur thinks should be done all the time, and the team's documented or decided it's being done differently. And so these things are constant negotiations that need to be brought together. You can collapse time on that by having processes that people have to actually follow. They have to actually mark it off and complete it. There's a checklist that they're signing off on that they're actually doing, so that there's some accountability that they followed those steps. There needs to be accountability in place, because most people, just like learning to drive a car, you maybe read a manual once, took a test, passed the test. Maybe the first few times you drove, you were checking your mirrors all the time and making sure nothing was going on around the car. And now you just get in and you just do it. And you're probably skipping a bunch of steps you thought you needed to do in the beginning. And over time, maybe start to skip other steps. Some drivers don't turn on their blinkers, when they're changing lanes. They're like, people will figure it out around me, right? So they just don't do these things. So they're not following the process. They're breaking the law. And you have these things that you want to be followed because it keeps the business safe. It protects you from liability in the business, whatever. And your team members, they're going to gravitate towards skipping steps. They're going to gravitate towards what's easiest. And if there aren't checks and balances and accountability in place, what happens over time is everything's kind of gravitating towards some sort of ease and some sort of chaos, and you're not really aware of it. And then somebody quits is usually when you look at what they were doing, you're like, oh my gosh, it's usually the person that the entrepreneur thinks is the most critical and essential in the business. Every time I've had that person on my team that I thought if they left, my whole world would fall apart, my business would crumble, it'd be the worst thing ever. That was always the best person for me to lose. Why? Because what was happening was, the reason you feel like they're so critical is because you have so much uncertainty around what they do. And you feel like they're the only one that knows how to do it. And it's their job security they love to maintain. But really, if it can be done by them, it can probably be done by just about anybody that has maybe the right demeanor and the right personality type for that position. But you need to have those processes documented so they can step in. So I think that's kind of how I gauge it.
And I think I'll chime in with, as far as efficiency goes, you can keep all the same people, but there's so much mental anguish that happens when something isn't well defined. And so, even at DoorGrow and in many of the businesses that I've worked in, when you go and ask someone what they do in their day to day, they feel like that's a subjective question, because they feel like they're doing something different or slightly, at least slightly different in every single moment, in every single day. And there's so much time and energy that gets wasted when you're constantly having to reanalyze the entire problem and then make a decision on what the action should be. And when you actually start to document what each person is doing on a regular basis throughout the day, and you look at that from a macro perspective, even within that subjective lens of, yeah, maybe some things are approached in a different way depending on the scenario, there's very clear processes, tasks, and activities that are being done on a regular basis. And so if those can be defined and then clear expectations and processes can be attached to each of those bullet points, it allows each of your employees to have a better reference point for how to handle certain engagements in the business. And one of the things that creates turnover in a business, in my experience, is that when that level of certainty on what somebody should be doing to be successful in their role is not there, resentment starts to build towards whoever the entrepreneur or visionary or guiding light in the business is. And that resentment ultimately gets to a boiling point where it's no longer sustainable, and then that results in somebody quitting or throwing a fit or making a mistake or having an accident. And so documenting these processes is one of the best things that you can do to create a level of certainty in each of your employees' minds so that they can be more successful and more satisfied in their position, which means that retention-wise, you're going to keep your staff longer.
So I think so let's talk about some systems that are required so that your expansion into another market or in general is not premature. So, because if it is premature, your operational costs are going to go up significantly, right? I'll give an example. I talked to a property management company, and they had 2,000 doors. They were on the East Coast, and they had over 20 offices. So but only about 2,000 doors, and it was split among like 20 different offices. So their strategy for growth was going and buying up all these little mom and pop shops, and they would keep those shops intact. They would keep the staff and everything. Their operational costs were ridiculous. Then there's another client. He had 2,000 doors, and he had 3 locations, 2 in Utah, 1 in Idaho, and eventually, became part of the Home River group, right? So his operational costs were far lower, right? Same amount of doors. His market was probably even a lower rent market, but he was probably making more money because operationally, among those doors, he didn't have 20 offices, 20 buildings to pay the lease or whatever, taxes on or whatever, all the support staff that goes with each of these offices, all this duplicated stuff. So here's what I think is essential to take a look at if you're thinking, hey, I want to expand into another location. First, you need to actually ask yourself, would I do it even if I were able to continue to grow here? If I were able to continue to have the doors in this area where I want it, would I do it? The thing to keep in mind is according to the Iceberg report, the last I saw, it was like 30% of rental properties are professionally managed. So there's like 70% in single family residential, at least. There's like 70% available potential market share to be created. A lot of people think, well, it's impossible to do that. But if you look at Australia, you've got like 80% of single family residential almost is professionally managed. They've gone there, at some point were probably around where we are, and they've gotten it to 80%. We have so much opportunity there. There's so much blue ocean, and everybody's fighting in the bloody red water. We've talked about that on the show before. And so I think that the idea that we've run out of options is not always true. It is true if you're playing the game everyone else is playing. SEO, pay-per-click, content marketing, social media marketing, pay-per lead service. If you're doing those things, it's super competitive because that's what everybody's doing. That is focused on that small existing amount of market share, the people that are already looking for you, rather than reaching out and creating new market share, which is what we help our clients focus on, right? So that's one thing to take a look at. Now, the systems that need to be in place. Here are some of the systems that we have in our own business at DoorGrow. One, you need a planning system. Most businesses don't have a plan. They have no planning system. So that means like you have annual targets and you have quarterly goals as a company of things to implement, monthly goals. You're not just coming back from every property management conference with a list and chucking a grenade into the middle of the room after pulling the pin and saying, hey guys, I'm excited about this. We're going to do all these things. And your team goes, how? We're already maxed out. You don't have a system for growth because you don't have a system of planning in the business. And so if you don't have a planning system, if you can't tell me a realistic annual goal that you're going to hit, if you've been operating in, you think you have a system, and if you've not hit your annual goal for the last year or 2 or 3, you have a bullshit system. It's not real. You're not hitting your targets.
And I want to pause you there and unpack that statement that you made about coming back from the conference with all of these great ideas and then chunking the grenade in the room, because I do think that happens in every industry, but especially property management, because one, there's so many conferences, and two, it's really easy to get excited about an idea and then just chunk it onto your staff and say, implement this. And when you're talking about a planning system, the way that we do it here in DoorGrow that I think is really effective is you're talking about how do we reverse engineer everything on that list and put it in yearly, 6-month, 90-day, monthly, and weekly commitments, so that we know all of the steps that are required to achieve each bullet point on that vision list that came from the conference.
We take it even a step back further, and you're new to the team, so you've gotten to see this happen, but you'll remember we go through and we take a look at the business as a whole, and every business has like 5 core functions in the business, something I learned from one of my business coaches, Alex Sharfin. And this is basically the whole pipeline of the business. The goal of the business is to make money. That's how it is successful. And then it also needs some sort of purpose besides just making money. So those things drive everything that we do. So we take a look at these 5 core functions and we look at each of them. We figure out, where are we deficient? Where can we be stronger? It's impossible to be solid on all of them. That's impossible, because when one like for example, if you ramp up sales, then your fulfillment side is going to be hit constraints. You're going to have difficulties as a team. So if you're closing a bunch of doors, your team's going to have difficulty onboarding all these new clients, for example. So that's going to go down. So everything's always in flux. So the thing to work on is the thing that's weakest, generally, that's earliest in the sales pipeline. So we take a look at that and we figure out, all right, what are the things and what could we do? And then we decide what will we do as a team. Then we figure out what is possible for us to do over the next quarter. And these are all go back to our annual goal, which we have a couple of annual goals, and it's all broken down. We reverse engineer it from what the business actually needs. So if our goal is to focus on lead gen, we're not going to go implement if we're a property management company, we're not going to go and implement, a maintenance coordination software that quarter. If that's already going really well, that maybe we do that next quarter, or maybe that. And so the problem is businesses don't have a planning system. They don't know how to break this down. And business owners come back, and if they do come up with goals, they go to some, Tony Robbins event, and they're adding extra zeros to the end of everything, and they're getting super pumped up, and that demoralizes your team, because your team, all they hear is, this is impossible, and they're losing. There's no way you're going to hit these goals because they're pie in the sky dreams, and we get excited about them as entrepreneurs, but that's not the same for our team. Our team wants to see that we're hitting our numbers every month, not that we missed it this month. And so that idea in setting goals that a lot of people will throw out there, which I don't believe is true, is that it's better as a team to aim for the stars and miss than a pile of manure and hit. I think it's better as a team to aim for the pile of manure and have success. Your team can feel what it's like to win and have momentum.
Yeah. And so I just want to make sure that we're making this actionable for people and give people a clear way to assess whether they're prematurely expanding or whether expansion maybe is the right step.
Real simple question. Do you have a planning system? Can you say with certainty that you have an annual goal that you are confident that your team are going to hit financially? Do you have a quarterly goal that you know what you're doing this quarter, and that you feel pretty confident that you're going to get these quarterly targets implemented? Do you feel confident that your team can hit the 30-day goals that are going to help create that 90-day, those quarterly targets? And then does your team know what they're doing every single week relevant to those 30-day goals? Like,
Yeah.
it's like, and if the answer is yes to all of that, then you're just like operating with the shotgun approach, and your team feels confused. They're concerned. They don't know where the company's going, so they can't really help you get there. So everybody at DoorGrow is aligned towards my goal of revenue, making a difference in the industry. Like, all these things are very clear. We talk about them during every meeting, our whole planning system, what we're doing, even what we're doing on a weekly basis that we meet as a team, like we did yesterday, and to go over our weekly commitments. We checked in, what did you do towards these commitments that you had for last week? Did you get these done? So there's this high level of accountability. So that's a planning system. That's one system the business needs.
So far to analyze whether it's too premature to expand, we've got, if you as the entrepreneur walked away from the business, would the business still continue to operate with success? Then we have, if you could add the number of doors that you want to add in your existing marketplace without having to go to another locale, would you prefer to just add them in your existing marketplace, or is there some other reasoning for you to want to be in another city? And then do you have a clear planning system where you've got annual, 6-month, 90-day, monthly, and weekly commitments that are all being reverse engineered so your staff can be successful? And really, that's part of operating without you being directly involved in the operations. What else?
The other thing that's essential in the business before you can expand is we've mentioned this already, but you need process documentation. So you need a system in the business for finding and storing and updating documentation. You need a process system or documentation system in the business. That includes job descriptions, org chart. There needs to be like clarity as to who's supposed to be doing what and how to do things. And that's absolutely critical in a business, especially if it's going to scale, because once you have a team, there's turnover, there's hiring. These things can derail a business if they're critical roles, if you don't have these things in place. And so process documentation system is really important. The software we use is Process Street. Everyone can check out the episode that I did with the founder and CEO of Process Street. We use that as an internal documentation system. And then we also have job descriptions, org charts, these kind of things. And we're going through a process because we've added Jon to the team. And when you add a new team member, it screws everything up, Jon. So now we're changing. So now my role changes, right? So my job description is different. You're stealing things from me, which I love. And everybody else's job changes a bit too. Like, so we're making all these adjustments. Ashley, my ex-wife, she works for me now and works in the business, and she's great. And so she's over some of the operational pieces. You're taking on sales and marketing. And these are all things that I used to do. They were my role. And so like I said, I used to do every single thing in the business, every single thing. And now I've got, we have at least 10 people, I think, on the team, and they're all doing something that I used to do. And yeah, pretty much all of them are better at it than me. Like, everyone's better at these things than I am. Like,
yeah, and I just want to speak from the perspective of an employee, because anytime I've gone into a new business, if it's chaotic and nobody knows what they're doing and nobody has clearly defined roles, it is so uncomfortable for a new person to step into that environment. And that's why there's a lot of 90-day churn and turnover for new hires, because when somebody says, yeah, I don't feel like it's a good fit, what they mean is you didn't provide me with the level of certainty that I was looking for in this role. And when everything is clearly defined and documented the way that you've done at DoorGrow, it allows me as a new hire to come in with so much certainty. And I feel like everything is teed up for me to be successful in my position, which makes me want to do more in the position.
So the third system that's necessary, that's closely connected to that, so that you can avoid premature expansion, is you need an internal communication system. If you're still operating on SneakerNet or constant interruptions, like SneakerNet, as they walk into your office all the time and interrupt you, right? Then you're operating, really inefficiently. Every interruption costs you about 18 minutes of productivity for one team member. If one team member interrupts another team member, that's 18 minutes times 2. And I don't know what that is, but it's more than a half hour, right? So what is that,
36 minutes.
36 minutes, okay.
Too many.
Math. Too many minutes, right? Like 40 minutes down the drain because 2 people decided to talk to each other, or one person decided to interrupt somebody else. And so you have to protect and guard against interruptions. All of this stuff is stuff that has to be learned. It's stuff that I've had to pay lots of money to learn from different coaches. And it's like, I've met with Jason Fried, the creator of Basecamp. He hung out with me on a call like this for like 90 minutes, and he cut my staffing costs in half overnight. And we're high tech, like we were using all kinds of technology, and he pointed out how we were using this chat tool that had group rooms, and it was causing everybody to interrupt everybody all the time, and everybody felt like they had to read everything, and it made our entire business completely inefficient. The software was Slack, for those of you that are big Slack fans. And so Slack was absolutely killing and crushing our productivity as a team. It was basically an endless diarrhea of, without context, stream of information for every single project. And everyone on the team felt like they had to read every single thing.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that entrepreneurs are aware of is that when a team is under communicated, that's not a good thing. But there's this idea that maybe over communication is the way to go, and that's actually just as bad, if not as bad, because it creates so many it creates so many interruptions that then prevent people from finding the momentum and flow that allows them to be most efficient.
Yeah, most people need, the reason it costs you 18 minutes of productivity is because that's about how long after somebody that causes the interruption, regardless of how much time they're spending with you, they might spend 15 minutes with you. And then it's 18 minutes, or it takes time to get back into the flow. What was I doing? How do I rebuild this house of cards that I was building before Steve came in from finance and interrupted everything, right? So there needs to be an internal communication system that works effectively for the team, that only involves the people that need to know or deal with a certain thing at a certain given time, rather than everybody needing to see everything. And if you're a control freak as an entrepreneur and you need to know everything and see everything, you're probably the biggest bottleneck in the company. And so you need a planning system, you need a process and documentation system, you need an internal communication system. The other system that you need is you need an external communication system. You need a client communication system that makes it easy. So we use Intercom, some people will use Help Scout. You also might use your property management software in some ways for this. You might have phones, but you have to clearly have an effective client communication system. And that's something we're always working on improving, is client communication. We use Voxer internally as a team, and some of my coaching clients will use that as well. And so we've got a lot of tools that we use to increase the communication, but most of it is one-on-one. It's not causing big group interruptions or situations like that.
I think an important thing to reference here when it comes to creating the right communication systems is that there has to be clear lines for delegation. And so certain part of your process documentation needs to be letting each employee at each level and in each role understand what type of tasks are appropriate to delegate up to you and what needs to be delegated down.
Yeah. So all of that comes with the process documentation. The planning helps with that a lot, that system. And then, yeah, you need an internal communication system. And as part of that, right, I think that's kind of the organizational structure. There needs to be a clear line of communication where somebody reports to somebody. I was talking with a property manager the other day, and they're part of another business. And what she said is that this other business that she's a part of, outside of her property management business, there's like 3 bosses. Over one department, there's 2 managers. And I said, well, how did the team members know which one to go to? I said, are they very different personality-wise? Do they give different answers? She said, absolutely. So then how do they know which one to go to? And, so there's so much confusion in this entity. She could see it, and me hearing about it just made my skin crawl, because I was like, I would feel so crazy and uncomfortable because it sounds like a nightmare. And there's all this infighting and politics and all this stuff going on because nobody has any clarity. People don't even know. She said somebody got promoted in this business and everybody said, hey, congratulations. There was sort of a celebration. And they said, what? I almost emergency called on my phone. So, yeah. So
I'm
was
just
trying
going
to
to take
stop it.
I'm going to take this time to just pause you. And I know that there are people out there that are saying, this sounds like a lot of work. I'm already too stressed out. Like there's so much resistance to putting in this work. And you know, what we're talking about is, do you want to win at a new level of the maze? Do you want to be a high achiever? Because if you're satisfied with being kind of in this mediocre average zone of success, then maybe you don't need all of this. But if you ever want to get to a level where you're dominating your local marketplace and you're running a business that isn't just growing, but is growing comfortably, these things are mandatory, right?
Yeah, I can empathize with that strongly. And so the little story, just to wrap it, was everybody was congratulating this person. They were asking him like, oh, cool. What are you going to do now? And they said, I don't know. Figure it out as I go, I guess. Right. So, okay. So anyway, yeah, I think, so let's go back to that question. And what was the question again? Sorry.
Yeah,
I have to finish a thread.
Dave, there's so much resistance around
right. Okay.
showing up and having to actually do all of this stuff. And
Yeah,
so maybe you can talk about why it's important to push through that resistance or how to do that, and then why ultimately the short-term resistance and discomfort leads to a more comfortable, more profitable, and more fun business down the line.
I think I just would rather kill the resistance. So, and here's what I realized. I had a ton of resistance. When I started working with some of the best operational, like I was working with probably the best operational coach that might exist in the business world. And I had already studied traction and like EOS, and I'd heard of, you know, the Rockefeller habits and scaling up. And I went through this thing called Warrior, and there's other systems out there similar, like the 90-day year. There's all these planning systems have some commonalities between them, which I sort of outlined when we discussed the planning system. But I felt a ton of anxiety when I was going and learning this stuff. You want to know why? Because I'm not the person that should be doing that stuff. That kind of stuff is stuff that operationally minded people love. And I can geek out on a system, like I could see the genius in it, but me doing it, me implementing it, me running meetings, I'm not the person to do that. Most CEOs and entrepreneurs are the worst to run team meetings, to manage the team, to manage operations, to manage operational processes. And that's why you'll see almost any visionary that's really effective paired up with some sort of person that's operationally brilliant. It gives them the freedom to create ideas, create vision, and the operator helps them make that stuff come true and happen.
So if I'm a property manager and I'm still in that first sand trap, and maybe I'm not even doing more than $250,000 a year in revenue, and I don't really have the budget to bring these people on, can you talk about maybe what it would look like to start thinking about a hiring trajectory and mapping out some of the milestones of how I can get to this place?
I think this is a learned process to know clearly where your time is going, how you're the biggest bottleneck in the business, what needs to happen next. This is stuff that we teach, but it's a process, and there's a system for knowing exactly what you need next to take the business to the next level. It's part of the stuff that we teach clients. But I think that ultimately, for those that maybe they're the lower level, they're like, I can't hire a COO. I can't hire an operational manager. I can't even hire an operations assistant yet. Maybe they just get a personal assistant, an executive assistant, somebody that loves planning. They love process. They love documenting things. They love systems. Like they geek out on these things. They like calendars and spreadsheets. They love to color coordinate sock drawers. Like their closet is organized. Their desk is spotless. These are not typical visionary entrepreneur personality types that are high driven, type of people. And so if you are not that personality type. Now in property management, you do get some operationally minded people, but they might not also be the driver. They maybe need to get a BDM in the business, somebody that's out there crushing it and closing deals and aggressive, because maybe they're that operationally minded person. That's why I think every business needs to be built around you, the entrepreneur. But if you're hearing this and you're getting anxious, you're like, oh, all these systems, all this stuff, and you're overwhelmed, that probably means you're not the operations minded person. The operations person goes, this sounds great. Like they're like, they probably have some of these and they get excited about that. Those property managers are the ones that are like, I can't grow yet. We're working on all of our systems and processes first. And they have like 10 doors, right? So they're like documenting everything and getting everything dialed in. And then you have the opposite, right? So you have to figure out which type are you. But I think the other thing to point out is this stuff doesn't make your life crazier. And it doesn't make your life more chaotic, and it doesn't feel, it's not more work. Because when you start to get these things implemented and you're offloading and you're systemizing and you have planning and you have vision, your team can actually help you do all of this. And so every team member you add actually lowers your pressure and noise. Every team member I've added to the team has made my job and life easier. I'm doing less. Every day I'm doing less. Every new person I brought you on, I'm doing less. But what that allows me to do is to do more of the things that I really should be doing, the things that I really love, the things that really make me feel alive.
Yeah.
And I'm to the point now that I enjoy doing sales, but you've taken that off my plate, and you're taking some of the marketing stuff off my plate. I enjoy doing marketing, but there's things that I now want to do more than those things.
Yeah.
And so as you build out your team, and so the very first person you need usually is an assistant, very first person. And hopefully that's a person that you can grow into the role of being an operations assistant, an operations manager, maybe a COO of your company at some point, if they're brilliant and effective enough, because that's going to lower your pressure noise significantly, and they're going to help you get all of this stuff dialed in and implemented.
Now, I know a lot of people have hired somebody, at $10 an hour to be a personal assistant, and they've had a bad experience, or that person just didn't really do what they were supposed to do. So is there some way to think about bringing on a personal assistant where that's actually going to be a successful relationship?
Oh man. Well, yeah. So we've had people on the show like Hire Smart VAs and Anaquim with the Mexican VAs and some of the, if you're not an expert and you don't know how to answer that question, you want to just get a virtual assistant like those, or a great assistant we've had on the show. If you want a US-based assistant, you need help because you don't know how to identify these people. The mistake we make as entrepreneurs is we tend to hire people we like or that are like us. And that's not the person you usually need. You usually need a person that's somewhat your opposite, that can balance you out and handle the things and take things off your plate that give you more pressure noise. So I think we have a process we take people through to identify that, so that you can build up the ultimate job description for your dream team member. The silliest thing I ever hear, and I've mentioned this on some of the assistant shows, is when a team member or when an entrepreneur says to me, like, or starts asking around, like, what do you have your assistant do? That's like walking around the grocery store saying, hey, asking people, what do you eat? What are you having for dinner? Right? They just, because they have no clarity. You're not ready to hire. And so it's not what can they do, it's what do you need? And you have to get really clear on what do you not enjoy? Like what drains you? What's sapping your energy? What is out of alignment with you personally? And so that's one of the things we give people really strong clarity on, is who they are, what they should and shouldn't be doing. So the business can be built around the entrepreneur instead of built around somebody else's system or somebody else's process. This is my major problem with Traction and some of these other systems. It's building according to somebody's ideal system, which ironically, is a system that requires some sort of special coach that's super expensive, that you have to do it that one exact way. And you need this thing called an integrator that is the only one that can do it. Right.
Yeah. Well,
so you ultimately, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the people that I see who are the worst at delegation are really nice people, because really nice people hate asking other people to do stuff that they don't want to do themselves. And the misconception there is that that other people like the same type of work that you like. And you can always find somebody who loves to do the things that you hate to do. And that's how you should be thinking about hiring is let me find somebody that I can bring on as an assistant who can start to help me offload all the things I don't want to do, but they love doing those things.
Yeah, it's the biggest mistake we can make as an entrepreneur in our business, I think, when it comes to team members, is to assume that our team members think the way we do. Almost none of them do. They're very different. Otherwise, they'd be entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are just different. My team members love like being told what to do each day and having clear ideas of what to do. Me, I want freedom and I want autonomy, right? There's this, there's huge differences, and you need to recognize that the stuff that you hate doing, somebody loves doing that. I don't like calendars. I don't like staring at spreadsheets all day. I don't like doing graphic design in front of a computer all day. Can I do these? Can I enjoy them sometimes? Yes. But that doesn't mean that that's my highest, best use in the business or in life, and that I want to do that. But my team members that love those things, they love those things. They could do that every day. That's just fun for them. And so I don't ever have to motivate them. That's how I know I've gotten somebody in the right position, is because they love doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
And without getting too far off track, because we could do a whole episode just on like hiring, planning.
Yeah.
Whatever.
How does all this tie back into premature expansion and whether or not I, as a property manager, am ready to expand?
Yeah, but the one other system we didn't mention is you need a sales process and system. You need some sort of growth system that's feeding the business. This might be the most important. Some say sales solves all problems. Not totally true. But without sales, you don't have a business, right? There's no revenue. You can't pay your team members. Things get scary. You can't pay your mortgage or rent or whatever you're doing. You can't pay the lease on your building, right? So sales has to be happening. Growth has to be happening in the business. And so all of these things kind of go together. You need all these different systems in order to work. And if you have all these systems, then you almost have like a franchise model in which you can open up another office or a new location or expand into a new market. And then ultimately you're going to want to keep as much as possible, probably centralized, to lower operational costs, to reduce redundancies, etc., and get what you need to support that new location. But then all right, this is not premature. We've thought this out. The baby is ready to be born. Like, this is all set up. And the reason I call it premature expansion is because there's nothing premature that is usually considered positive, right? Anything that's premature, whatever you can think of, is usually a bad thing. And so I wanted people to understand, like, it's too early. It's too early. You don't have things in place. Get the things in place, and then it's not premature. Does that mean you're going to learn? Yeah, you're still going to learn. Are there going to be mistakes? Absolutely. Is it going to be messy sometimes? Sure. But that's running a business. Perfect businesses don't exist, right? That's part of that's what's going to happen. But if you're dealing with the idea of starting this new location, expanding everything else, and everything else is already a mess, you're just pouring gasoline on a fire that's already there, and it's just going to be worse.
Yeah, and these processes and systems really give you a kind of leverage that allow you to be really successful in a lot of different styles of expansion, whether that's opening another office or acquiring something. The best investors in the world, like Warren Buffett, are essentially people who are really good at systems and processes. And so when they go and acquire a business that's in chaos, they know that they can immediately implement the right systems, processes, and management team, and that business will become profitable very quickly. And so it puts you in a position where you have a huge competitive advantage over anybody who's just bootstrapping it or shooting from the hip.
So another form of premature expansion is death by opportunity, maybe. It's where entrepreneurs, we see opportunity everywhere. You're the opportunist type of property manager or entrepreneur business owner. If you are like, we could start a roofing company. Let's start a maintenance company, and we could service other companies. Let's do roofing. Let's get a house cleaning business. Let's do carpet cleaning. Like, I know business owners that they have do property management and they have like 7 or 8 other businesses.
Yeah,
And
it's like
so,
jack of all trades, master of none.
and some of them can be good. They can build out teams. They can have things really well dialed in. And if you learn to do it for one, like you were saying, you can do this for all of these businesses and make sure that it's going well. But if one's a mess, you're just adding more problems and making it more challenging. And what it does is it dilutes focus. Focus is one of the key ingredients for making money. And so if you want to make a certain amount of money and you're like, well, let's add more services, you would think that would add more money. But what it usually does for most entrepreneurs is it just dilutes what they can already do. And so it just divides that up and it becomes more and more challenging. It's a lot easier to make $1 million in one company than $1 million with 10,
Yeah.
annually. So that's another form of premature expansion. And that all comes back to the planning system. The planning system and our vision and goals as a company, like, give me constraints as an entrepreneur and as a visionary. Like, I'm like, we could do this and we could do that. And my team are like, we can't. Like, we've got all of these goals that we're working on. We've got this, we've got this. Maybe we can make room for that next quarter or next year. And so this protects them from like the grenade when I come back from a conference and have all these ideas and want to change everything. They'll say, I can see that I don't want to lose sight of what we have going already and destroy that momentum. I want to achieve these objectives. It's going to get us money. It's going to get us, making a difference, all these things that I want. We need to keep that going, and then we can figure out where can that fit in. And so it just allows us to not just go through the buffet line, throw a ton of stuff on our plate, and end up not being able to utilize even half of it.
Yeah, and I think once everything that you're talking about, the communication systems, the processes, the systems, once all that's in place, it also gives your staff and your employees a mechanism for delivering feedback to you, even if that's uncomfortable feedback. And almost always, well, maybe not almost always, but at least in the businesses that I've run, as a high-level manager, the employees who are actually doing the operations a lot of the times have really solid ideas on how to make things more efficient, but they feel afraid of communicating those up. And so by opening up those channels of communication and making it so that it's not uncomfortable for a lower level employee to give a great idea and have that idea be received, you can actually empower your team to fix a lot of the inefficiencies.
Yeah. Here's a real simple thing that I thought of. That you can recognize if you're ready for premature expansion. If you are the one running all your team meetings and you're the first to speak in all those meetings, you're already losing. Have you noticed that I'm not running the meetings, and everyone asks me what I think last?
Yeah.
Hey, are you stuck on anything? I'm the last one to go, right? So yeah. Because it's so easy for us as entrepreneurs to say, hey, yeah, here's my idea, and everyone should do this. And then when you ask your team members, they're going to go, yeah, what the boss says, he pays me.
Yeah.
That sounds like a good idea. I'll go with what he says. That's the safest answer.
Yeah. And so growth in all levels, personally, and when it's directly related to revenue, means that there has to be an integration of discomfort sometimes, and the proper communication levels mitigate and buffer the discomfort that employees have for communicating good ideas. And oftentimes the people on the ground level are the ones most capable of finding the thing that's going to work for your current team dynamic.
Yeah. So this is something we've been thinking about a while. We run our business using a system that we call DoorGrow OS, that I feel like is one of the most brilliant planning systems out there. It's a consolidation of several different planning systems, operational coaches I've worked with, having brilliant operators on my team, and it's like something I built out, like even software-wise, that we use internally as a team. And you've just started to get a taste of this, and the team, like, there's clarity, there's communication, everyone knows what they're doing. We're hitting targets and goals and objectives each week, and the momentum is strong. This is how we grew 300% in a year.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting way of running a team. I've run a lot of teams that have a lot of branches underneath the management, and this just provides a level of efficiency and oversight that still makes upward and downward communication very feasible and very easy. And so maybe at some point I'll convince you to share that system with the rest of the world. But right now, it's been really interesting for me to understand some of those principles and see how, the years and years of working with all these coaches has kind of been baked into some of these ideas and the things that you're identifying as the ways to know whether what you're doing is premature expansion or actually profitable growth. So I don't know if you have anything else on your list, but I know that we're starting to get a little bit long. So maybe we could just recap what we've talked about, and I'll turn it over to you for any final words of how maybe somebody can take what we spoke about in this podcast and make it actionable. Like for somebody who has nodded their head to at least one or two of the things that you said during this podcast, what should be their next step for starting to figure out how they can start to tweak the knobs and levers of their business in order to be more in line with what will actually make them successful?
I think every business owner is doing the best they can with what they know. I think every person on the planet really is doing the best they can with the limited access to knowledge and resources they currently possess. And so if you knew better, you would do better. There's a lot of things I don't know. There's a lot of things that I can't see. And so my best feedback is, you probably heard a lot of ideas on this recording. You probably felt, maybe you were nodding your head, but ultimately, if you feel stuck, or you don't feel like you're going as fast as you want, or you don't feel like your company's in momentum, then you need help. You need to reach out. And I think that's one of the scariest things for us to do as entrepreneurs. But I do it. I have coaches that I pay, and I go and I get help. And if I don't know something, I hire a coach. I've got an event I'm planning on going to in March to learn something that I feel like I'm weak at in the business. And normally I would hand off to other team members, but it's something I've avoided that I need to know more about. And so I think, like, you need to have enough vulnerability to recognize that you can't do it all on your own. And you're not Atlas holding the entire globe on your back. Like, you need to get support. And if you don't feel like you have support, if you don't feel like you have somebody in your corner, if you feel like you're the smartest person in the room in your company, then and everybody's just going to say yes to whatever you throw at them, there's a big problem. You've got big blind spots. You need to reach out and you need to get help. And that could be us at DoorGrow. Set up a call with us, reach out, and we can help you identify some of the blind spots, some of the leaks, some of the inefficiencies, and get you into a high state of momentum. And we start at in those 5 core functions with the very beginning.
Yeah, and I want to just mention, because I can feel that somebody just had some resistance to, you can't do it on your own, you need a coach, and that almost sounds too salesy. And really, maybe we could alter that statement and soften it for that person who feels resistance to that, because you could do it on your own. You could go to the bookstore, you could buy all the books, you could read through them all, you could slowly implement things and see what works and what doesn't work, and it would take you forever. Or you can work with a coach and collapse time. And so for people who are looking to collapse time, that's when it becomes incredibly valuable to work with somebody who's already done all of that research and extracted the best practices, split test all the ideas, figured out what works, and now you can have a roadmap for how to get to success in the quickest way possible, instead of having to trial and error your way down the road.
Yeah. I mean, I am a big fan of trial and error, but I do also like collapsing time, and my coaches have helped me collapse time dramatically. And so, yeah, I mean, I was that guy. I was for many years. I was the guy that thought I could watch another YouTube video or read another book and I could figure it out on my own. And it took a ton of time. And so you have to recognize there's at least 3 currencies, right? There's everything. If you want growth, it involves time. It's going to involve money, and it's going to involve focus or energy or work or effort, whatever you want to call it. And those could probably be broken up even further, but you've got these 3 currencies. And if you use all 3 and invest all 3, you can grow faster. But yeah, if you decide I'm not going to invest money, so I don't want to go hire a coach, or I don't want to pay DoorGrow, or I don't want to go spend money on this, then you can go buy cheap things like books and watch free YouTube videos and get some good stuff, some stuff that's leading you the wrong way, but you don't know. They're an expert, so maybe they're telling the truth, and you try it out. And then what ends up happening is it's just going to take infinitely more time. That was my challenge. Is I spent a massive amount of time, and it was painful. And when I finally started to invest serious money towards the best that I could afford at the time, I collapsed time dramatically, and I always made that money back. Not even just that one, like made it back. I made it back monthly. I was making more than I paid the coach the one time. And so that's, yeah. And that's almost been my experience with every coach. Like, and I've got a coach that some of my coaches have paid $5,000 a month. Like, it gets ridiculous, but do I make more than that a month? Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, and I think one of the things that I hear on the calls is if someone isn't seriously setting goals for their business, it feels to me like it's because they're afraid that they're not going to hit them. And so if they don't say them out loud, then they don't have to suffer the defeat of not hitting it. And one of the reasons to work with a coach is to have the accountability and the hand-holding required to get you over that resistance and that hump so that you can actually start hitting those numbers. And the first time that you hit one of the goals that you set, you get addicted to it and you want to keep hitting goals. But because people have set so many goals in the past and then failed at hitting them, they don't set goals anymore. And one of the things that a good coach can do is get you back in alignment with your goals so that you recognize that that vision is possible to hit. And I think that that's part of that collapsing time. And so there's a ton of great business books out there. There's a ton of great niche courses out there. You can throw money into a million different ways to quote unquote grow your business. But if you're not looking at your business holistically and you're just looking to fix a symptom with some kind of a Band-Aid, you're never going to be an A player in anything that you're doing. And there's an opportunity to level up by working with a coach, whether that's DoorGrow or somebody else. But I have worked with coaches for the past 20 years. I believe in them wholeheartedly. And if you're going to excel at what you're doing, you have to have somebody who's playing a bigger game than you.
That's very true. I agree. And so let's end on that note. Jon, I appreciate you and hanging out with you again. And for those that are watching, make sure to, if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe, like us. If you're hearing this in iTunes, please be sure to leave us some feedback. We want to hear your real feedback on there. Leave us a review. That helps us out. And until next time, everybody, to your mutual...
I'm also going to say before you close out,
oh yeah, go ahead.
Join us in the Facebook group, because this can be an ongoing conversation that we have in the Facebook group. And we have so many stellar examples of property managers who are doing all the right things there. And you can interface with them. You can interface with the people on our team. And you can tell us what's working, not working in your business. And then if you disagree with everything that we just said, we invite you to come and have that conversation as well. Because any type of conversation, whether you're praising what we're doing or trying to chip it down with an axe, is going to allow us to grow and iterate and become better. And so we want to have you in that group.
Yeah, well said. So yeah, so until next time, everybody, to our mutual growth. Bye, everyone.
Bye.